I'm Bettina Bowden. Thank you so much for joining us here on Alabama's 13 as we commemorate Birmingham's 50 Years Forward celebration, marking 50 years since the 1963 Civil Rights Movement. From a bombing that shook an entire nation to a silent foot soldier who played an integral part in desegregation, follow us on a journey to years past where the idea of being treated equal was merely a dream for some. We begin our journey right here at the 16th Street Baptist Church. Who could forget these images? Here's Linda White.
One of the key moments in civil rights history was the bombing of 16th Street Baptist Church, where 4 little girls lost their lives. This marks the 50th year of that tragic bombing. One of those here that day, 15-year-old Carolyn Mall. She was an assistant Sunday school secretary, and she took a phone call inside the church just before the bomb went off. What did the other person say?
3 minutes. They'll call her. Yeah.
Nothing
3
more.
minutes. Nothing more.
A member of this church since she was just 2 years old, Carolyn Mall, now known as Carolyn McKinstry, grew up in this church.
You know, I played all over the building as a child, in the closets and the choir stand and everywhere.
History records 16th Street Baptist Church as the oldest black church in the city. When visiting the city, famous faces and names attended the church, like NAACP co-founder W.E.B. Du Bois, the first African-American president of Howard University, Mordecai Johnson, and the man known as the father of the Civil Rights Movement, Benjamin Mays. But 16th Street is better known for what happened 50 years ago, September 15th. 1963.
When the bomb first exploded, we heard screams, glass crashing in, and then someone said, "Hit the floor."
Known as a key meeting place in the Civil Rights Movement, dynamite with a timer was placed underneath stairs on the outside of the church. That was also where women's bathroom was located inside the building. 4 little girls died that day. 11-year-old Denise McNair and 14-year-olds Addie Mae Collins, Carol Robertson, and Cynthia Wesley.
I knew them very well. Cynthia Wesley's father was my elementary school principal. Now, Denise's father, Chris McNair, was my 9th grade teacher at Parker High School. And Addie was in my Sunday school class.
There was a 5th little girl in that bathroom that day, Addie's sister, Sarah.
Sarah survived. Sarah lost one eye and has 30% vision in the remaining eye.
Due to the destruction, the funerals for 3 of the girls were held at 6th Avenue Baptist Church. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. gave the eulogy. McKinstry attended the service.
During the eulogy for the girls, Dr. King said to us that unmerited suffering was redemptive, and that the blood of these dead girls might well serve as a redemptive force, not just for Birmingham, but for the United States and for the world at large.
That suffering put Birmingham on the map for many who didn't know its reputation before that.
Dr. King used to refer to Birmingham as the city of hardcore resistance. We were the toughest, baddest city in the South. Hardcore resistance. We weren't budging, we weren't moving. I think that with the death of the girls, there came a softening of hearts, not just in Birmingham, but even all around the world.
And hearts did soften. Children in Wales raised $1 million in pennies to replace a glass-stained window at the church. 10 months after the deaths of the 4 little girls, Congress passed the Civil Rights Act of 1964.
Yes, Lord.
Today, the church stands strong and refurbished. McKinstry headed the 16th Street Foundation to restore the building. The campaign raised $3.8 million, but remnants of the bombing remain.
This is left over from 1963.
Wow.
Can you see the wood?
Yes, ma'am. During this 50th anniversary year of the bombing, using her book While the World Watched, McKinstry speaks to groups here in Birmingham and beyond, including the Today Show.
A meeting that would have taken place after church.
Continuing the conversation about race relations and not forgetting the past.
I do believe that when we don't teach the lessons learned, then we have to learn those lessons again. We repeat the mistakes.
McKinstry works very hard to share those lessons with visitors who flock to 16th Street Baptist Church, drawn to it by its place in history. And the place where the girls were killed, it sits untouched, enclosed behind a wall. 4 men were later convicted of setting off that bomb that led to the deaths of the 4 little girls. While this memorial marks where the bomb was placed outside of the church, the foundation still hopes to put here life-size statues of each girl that died.
We've all heard of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, and Fred Shuttlesworth, but there were many unsung heroes fighting for the very same freedom. Coming up, we'll introduce you to one of those silent foot soldiers who played a major role in desegregating the University of Alabama. Thanks so much for staying with us. It's hard to imagine that not too long ago, people of color were not allowed to enroll in many state colleges, including the University of Alabama. But all of that changed one hot summer day nearly 50 years ago. Kalisha Whitman joins us now with more on that story, and Kalisha, memorable moments.
Memorable moments, and Bettina, for many it's hard to believe. Now many people know the story of Vivian Malone and James Hood, but it's the story of those silent foot soldiers who helped them stay the course that you won't find in any history books.
The year was 1963. The era was filled with great music. Moviegoers had their sights on Cleopatra and Sidney Poitier in Lilies of the Field. However, in Tuscaloosa, 2 young adults had their eyes on social change. Vivian Malone and James Hood were about to desegregate the University of Alabama.
Somebody had to blaze the trail, and these people did, and they did a good job at it. They were both very confident and competent as well.
At the time, Truett Evans was a student at Stillman College in Tuscaloosa. He is 70 years old now, recalling 50 years ago to those turbulent racial times when blacks were shunned simply because of the pigment of their skin is a memory that has yet to fade.
I wasn't actually scared. I was concerned. I was determined that the situation that was here at the university would not continue.
Unlike Malone and Hood, Evans didn't set out to integrate this institution of higher learning. However, he stood in the background with many, all while working with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the Ford Foundation, and a number of other agencies to ensure Malone and Hood were enrolled.
I was motivated by really the live broadcast on radio at that time, coming out of Mississippi when James Meredith went into the University of Mississippi, and all of the violence and the uproar there. And it just, I guess you could say it got my blood boiling. And I said, somebody should do the same thing here.
Evans is a silent foot soldier in the civil rights movement, whose name you won't find in history books or by doing an internet search. But he was there, marching, protesting, and supporting the civil fight for human rights.
It was adventurous, it was time-consuming, but I think it was rewarding as well.
Days before Malone and Hood took the brave walk to Foster Auditorium, where the state would be watching, where the governor would be standing.
Do hereby denounce and forbid this illegal and unwarranted action by the central government.
A feat that would need the President of the United States and the military to accomplish.
If an American, because his skin is dark, cannot enjoy the full and free life which all of us want, then who among us would be content to have the color of his skin changed and stand in his place? Who among us would then be content?
The 2 signed Evans Stillman College yearbook. Those writings are the only artifacts Evans has left.
Dear Truett, we walk in the path of narrow shadows, and what our fate nobody knows.
Dear Truett, you are making wonderful progress in the area of human relations. Keep up the good work. Yours, Vivian J. Malone.
And the gentle strokes of the pen still resonate the message of this silent foot soldier's fight for civil rights.
It was just a matter of going through the process.
Malone and Hood made a grand statement, but if it hadn't been for the silent members of the movement, civil rights may not have been the movement the world knows today. And the two students who were able to change the racial makeup of this university may not have been able to do it with as much persistence, precision, pride, and patience. If you ask Evans if he played an instrumental role, you'll get a different answer.
I have not thought of myself as that. I was in the background trying to help out, and that's the way I see myself now, as somebody who tried to help.
However, the members of the background, all the Truett Evanses who were involved in the civil rights movement, helped sustain the frontrunners like Vivian Malone, James Hood, Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr., and Fred Shuttlesworth. It's usually those members of the background who get lost in history, but without the work of the silent foot soldier, the story just isn't complete.
Bettina, Truett Evans is now the pastor of Broad Street Missionary Baptist Church in Birmingham.
And because his story is recorded right here, his part in the civil rights movement, of course, will not be forgotten. Our 50 Years Forward commemoration continues in just a few minutes, so stay with us. Here's Ashley Roberts.
This group used their voices to uplift and inspire many during the civil rights movement. Coming up, I'll show you how the movement choir gave foot soldiers strength through song. If you talk to anyone who lived or fought during the civil rights movement here in Birmingham, they tell you music played an instrumental role. Music not only gave foot soldiers a voice, but strength to keep fighting. It's hard not to be moved when you hear them sing. Actually listen to the words and understand the true message behind the melodies.
We didn't care to be treated as second-class citizens any longer. We wanted the opportunity to vote. We wanted the opportunity to get a job. We wanted the opportunity to go to Fair Park and all of the things that every other child did, as well as the adults.
This choir was formed at the request of civil rights leader Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth. During the 1950s and 1960s, this choir performed during mass meetings of the Alabama Christian Movement for Human Rights. Their voices uplifted and inspired people at those meetings to keep fighting. For several years, Bethel Baptist Church served as headquarters for the Alabama Christian Movement for Human Rights. This is where those movement meetings were held and where the choir performed. And when speaking of the choir's influence, Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth said it best. He said, "We will move them out of their seats and into the streets," and that's exactly what they did. At the time, Eloise Ford Gaffney, who is now the choir director, was just 13 years old. She says this song moved people, literally.
The people would get up out of their seats in the church and the mass meetings. They would get up and join the lines. We would go out into the streets and protest.
Gaffney, who remember was just a teenager at the time, was one of the many kids who participated in the Children's March in 1963, also known as the Children's Crusade. Hundreds of Birmingham students marched downtown to talk to the mayor about segregation in the city. Many were arrested, set free, then arrested again the very next day.
We were too young to realize the danger, but we were so involved with the movement, so we went to the meetings every night, so that kind of gave us a little strength.
And on this day, 50 years later,
believe it or not, we were brave enough to...
The members who have been with this choir since the very beginning shared their past experiences with the community.
And you make me really proud when you're doing something constructive with your lives.
Mamie Brown Mason says she was arrested for trying to eat at a whites-only cafeteria. Just as she sang and fought for freedom and change back then, she says it's a blessing to see change now.
Elected President Obama as president, we were talking about how we wish our parents were still alive and how we wish that Martin Luther King was still alive. All those people, we wish they were here to see a black president. It means so much to me.
A meaning and memories of the past that can't be erased. It's a history Gaffney says young children should know, learn, and understand.
If they would understand the struggles that we went through to help them to be able to get a job wherever, you know, your education and your ability to do things, that should determine the kind of job that you get, not the color of your skin. So we fought for them to have that right, and our goal is for them to understand that they're standing on our shoulders and, you know, be all that you can be.
Words of wisdom from a generation of fighters who didn't mind standing or singing on the front lines. The choir is now known as the Carlton Reese Memorial Unity Choir in honor of the man who composed several of their songs, and the choir still has about 6 original members.
As we look back on the civil rights movement, it's hard not to acknowledge the hundreds of children who took a firm stand against segregation. Coming up, we'll introduce you to one of those child foot soldiers and tell you about her continued efforts to make a difference.
Come on, let's give everybody a big
Children foot soldiers played some of the most instrumental roles in the civil rights movement, and many of those who were hosed down in the street or attacked by dogs were very young. Now one of those foot soldiers is using her experience to inspire the next generation.
Meet Reverend Gwendolyn Webb, but 50 years ago she was 14-year-old Gwen Cook.
A school like this, with so many of you who really just don't happen to look like I look.
With bright eyes and curious minds fixated on her, she journeys back to her storied youth, taking students along for the ride. In the segregated South, whites stayed with whites and blacks with blacks. Webb's hometown was known as Birmingham, spurring riots, violence, and civil unrest.
Because a man came along by the name of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Yeah, that's the way I felt too, baby.
Because in 1963, the movement needed a jolt, and leaders like Dr. King and Reverend James Bevel turned to the youth for a strategic purpose. But Webb's mother instructed her to not participate.
We had signals and everything was a big secret.
Over the airways, popular radio DJs used code words and songs to alert children when it was time to march. Then on what was called D-Day, students received the signal.
We knew that it was going to be a party in the park.
Their assignment brought them to 16th Street Baptist Church, but later every child would be put behind bars to put pressure on police.
We went to jail with a purpose, and that purpose was to make this world a better world, but to make Birmingham, Alabama a better place for all of God's children to live.
Out of fear, some adults were afraid to be jailed, but as Webb put it, young people were fearless. And nonviolence was the only way to beat down the oppressive and hateful Jim Crow laws in Birmingham, whether it was through song,
We shall overcome,
or arms linked in solidarity in the face of water hoses and angry dogs. Reverend Webb's interactive approach resonated with these youngsters, who will likely never share a similar experience.
I liked how they felt so sure of themselves, like how they saying that we shall overcome so powerfully.
It shows that I'm blessed and I'm glad that we fought for rights.
These children exemplify what God wants, and they also exemplify the dream of Dr. Martin Luther King.
Birmingham no longer recognized as Birmingham, a city seeking to reflect a new image where all are included, welcomed, and celebrated.
Reverend Gwen Webb now has her own foundation called the Foot Soldiers International, and she says her mission is to spread love.
We hope you enjoyed today's special as we honor the lives of those who sacrificed so much for our generation and also those to come. The city of Birmingham has a number of events throughout the year commemorating the 50 Years Forward celebration. For more information on that or to see any of these stories again, go to our website, alabamas13.com/Black History. And for all of us here at Alabamas 13, thank you so much for joining us.